I handed in my resignation without a word, leaving behind the office that had become a cage. For years, they dismissed me, called my work replaceable. They didn't know my script. Lines of code I wrote in quiet nights was the only thing keeping their production alive. I watched the building fade in my rearview mirror, knowing that somewhere inside, screens would soon fill with red errors, phones would start ringing, and panic would spread. When they finally realized what was happening, it would be too late. They thought they'd buried me. Instead, they were standing on my trap. I had been with Helix Dynamics for almost 9 years, long enough to know the creak in every floorboard of its aging infrastructure. My title was back-end engineer, but what I really did was keep the company's production system breathing. An old, patched-together platform no one wanted to touch. The executives called it legacy tech, like it was an insult. I called it the heartbeat. Every night, long after the office lights went out, I sat alone, typing in the glow of my dual monitors. They thought I was clinging to outdated code. What they didn't know was that I had built something no one else could. At home, the cost was obvious. I pushed open the door close to midnight. The smell of reheated dinner long faded. My son's bedroom was dark. I eased it open to see him curled up, breathing slow, the toy truck I'd promised to fix still on the nightstand. On the kitchen counter, a folded note in my wife's handwriting read, "You missed the parent-teacher meeting." Again, I pressed my thumb against the paper, wondering how many times I'd said "next time" and meant it. That week, a security alert had flashed on my private terminal, an intrusion attempt, sophisticated and precise. The firewall had let it through, but my script hadn't. Quietly, invisibly, it intercepted the malicious packets and rerouted them into a dead-end loop until the attacker gave up. No one else even knew it had happened. If the system was a ship, I wasn't just keeping the engine running. I was patching holes mid-voyage while the captain sipped champagne on deck. The next morning, a new hire joined the dev team. Lucas, mid-20s, clean-cut, and with the kind of confidence that came from thinking you knew everything. He hovered behind me for a moment too long while I was reviewing a log file. "Is that the production monitor?" he asked casually, his eyes scanning the scrolling lines of code. I minimized the window before he could get a better look. His smile didn't reach his eyes. By the end of the week, I noticed my name missing from several email chains. Meetings about core updates were happening without me. The flagship project I'd been architecting for months was suddenly under a new direction, now officially assigned to another team. On Friday afternoon, I stepped outside to call my mother. She asked the same question she always did. "Why haven't they made you a manager yet? All your friends from college are bosses now." I told her it was complicated. She sighed in that way that made me feel like I was letting her down without even trying. Late one evening, I stayed to push a minor hotfix, only to catch something strange in the commit history. Fragments of my script, copied into another branch. The author tag belonged to Tom, a guy I'd shared late-night coffee runs with for years. But the code was incomplete, missing the key sequence that made it run. I stared at the screen, a heat rising in my chest. They were trying to replicate what I'd built, and they didn't even understand it. The next Monday, I walked past the break room and froze at the sound of my name. Richard Hayes, our senior manager, was speaking in his low, confident tone to someone I couldn't see. "When we move everything to the new servers, We won't need him anymore. My stomach tightened. I kept walking, but each step felt heavier. That night, lying awake, I thought about the script on my encrypted drive, about the system it was holding together like invisible threads. I thought about Lucas's eyes scanning my monitor, Tom's incomplete copy, Richard's voice in the break room. The waterline was rising, and I was the only one bailing. The question was, how much longer did I want to keep the ship afloat for a captain who didn't even know my name? 2 days after overhearing Richard's voice in the break room, I noticed something odd in the server logs. My script, the real one, the one I kept locked behind my personal encryption, had been cloned and deployed to a staging server. That staging server wasn't part of my workflow. I traced the test run and watched in real time as the system buckled, threads colliding, until the entire environment collapsed into a crash loop. Whoever had copied my work hadn't understood how to configure it. It was like handing a loaded weapon to someone who thought it was a toy. I followed the trail through the commit history, expecting to find Tom's name again. But the tag belonged to an account I didn't recognize. Internal admin credentials with elevated privileges. That level of access meant only one thing. Someone high up had given the order. When I finally matched the IP logs, my stomach tightened. Richard Hayes. Not Tom. Not Lucas. The man who had been smiling at company town halls, praising team spirit, was using my work to line his own pockets. That night at home, I was still replaying the crash in my mind when my son padded into the room, holding something behind his back. "I made you this," he said, handing me a sheet of paper. It was a drawing, me at my desk, smiling, with a big green check mark over the computer screen. In reality, I hadn't smiled in months while working. I sat there staring at the paper, feeling the edges soften under my fingers. The innocence of it made the weight on my chest heavier. The next morning, an email slid into my inbox from an unlisted address. "They will pin the crash on you. Be ready." I scanned the headers, looking for a clue, but whoever sent it had scrubbed their trail. My hands hovered over the keyboard. Was this a warning from a friend or bait from an enemy? I decided it didn't matter. I needed to protect myself. That afternoon, I started copying the raw execution logs from the last 6 months onto an encrypted drive. Every backup of my script was saved in triplicate, one on my personal secure storage, one hidden on an external drive at home, and one uploaded to a private blockchain wallet. If Richard wanted to rewrite history, I would have the receipts. I also slipped a new sequence into a dormant branch of the code, a piece of bait. On the surface, it looked like a refined version of the script. In reality, it was a diagnostic snare. If someone tried to deploy it, it would log every keystroke and capture the origin of the command, the kind of thing that would make thieves start looking over their shoulders. Later that week, Lucas approached my desk, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "Heard the staging server had a meltdown," he said. I shrugged, pretending not to care. "These things happen." He smirked, as if he knew something I didn't. Maybe he thought he was clever. Maybe he was just playing a role. That night, another message popped up, this one not from an anonymous address. It came from Mia Nguyen, the new QA engineer no one seemed to talk to. "I know what they're doing to you," the email read. "I was fired last year after flagging a security flaw Richard ignored. I've been watching since I came back. I can help." Attached was a packet of internal memos, time-stamped and damning. Richard had been negotiating with an overseas competitor for months, using system performance improvements as leverage. My script was the crown jewel in his sales pitch. I barely had time to digest the documents before a calendar invite flashed on my screen. Urgent. Meeting with Executive Review Committee. 15 minutes. No subject line. No agenda. As I made my way to the conference room, my phone buzzed with a new headline alert. Major Helix Dynamics. Client reports massive data loss. The timing was too precise to be coincidence. The moment I stepped through the door, every eye in the room turned toward me. Richard sat at the head of the table, hands folded, the picture of controlled authority. "Ethan," he began, his voice dripping with false concern, "we have reason to believe your recent code changes are linked to this incident. Care to explain yourself?" The bait had been taken. But whether I walked out of this room as an accused saboteur or the man who could bring down Richard Hayes, that would depend on my next move. The conference room was colder than usual. The air conditioning turned up high enough to make the skin on my arms prickle. The long glass table reflected the pale light from the ceiling, a sterile glow that made everyone's faces look sharper, harder. Richard sat at the head, flanked by two senior executives, both of them with legal counsel beside them. A pile of printed reports lay in front of my seat, my name stamped across the top in bold red letters, Internal Incident Report. "Ethan," Richard began, the tone perfectly measured, "we've traced the outage and subsequent data loss to changes in your code. This has already cost us one of our biggest clients. We need you to be honest about what happened." It wasn't a question. It was an opening statement for an execution. I didn't sit down immediately. My eyes scanned the table, noting the crossed arms, the tightened jaws. The verdict was already written in their expressions. I slid into the chair, slowly, buying time. "If you've traced the issue," I said evenly, "then you already know the changes in question were never deployed by me." Richard's smile was thin. "That's not what our logs say." He tapped the printed report like it was gospel. One of the executives to his left leaned forward, her voice low and controlled. "We're giving you an option here, Ethan. Admit there was negligence, take a reduced settlement, and we can avoid a public legal battle. Or—" She let the word hang, heavy in the air. The "or" didn't need explanation. It meant lawyers, courtrooms, career suicide. My phone, face down on the table, vibrated once. I glanced down. A text from an unknown number. "Leave the room now. I can help you." It was signed only with the initials AM. I looked up casually, but my heart was pounding. The sender had to be in this room, or at least close enough to see what was happening in real time. Richard's voice cut in again. "We can keep this internal, Ethan, but we need your cooperation." I remembered my wife's voice the night after my last performance review. "I just want you to be respected, not afraid every time you walk into that building." She had been standing at the sink, hands in soapy water, looking at me with a kind of tired sadness I'd never seen before. That sadness was heavier than anger. It was the look of someone who'd lost faith. I could feel the weight of every choice pressing down on me. I could admit guilt to something I didn't do, keep my head down, maybe salvage a fraction of my career. Or I could push back, knowing it would ignite a fire I couldn't control. Without a word, I reached into my bag, pulled out my laptop, and placed it on the table. A murmur rippled through the room. "What are you doing?" Richard asked, the first hint of unease in his voice. "Showing you exactly what happened," I said. My fingers moved across the keyboard in a rhythm I knew by heart. A few lines of terminal commands, then a secure authentication sequence only I could complete. I didn't look up as I worked. The room was so silent I could hear the faint hum of the ceiling lights. When I hit enter, the first phase of the safe mode protocol executed. Across the company's internal network, production processes began to lock themselves in read-only status. Automated job queues froze. API endpoints returned maintenance responses. Richard's voice rose. "What the hell is this?" I looked up at him. "It's the only thing keeping your system from collapsing completely, and now it's mine to control." Gasps, hurried whispers. One of the lawyers stood as if ready to object, then sat back down. "This isn't just a lock," I continued. "It's a safeguard. The version you've been trying to steal, that was incomplete. The real script doesn't just stabilize your system. It tracks every unauthorized change, every suspicious commit, and sends a full report to an off-site endpoint." Richard's face paled. "Where?" "Not here," I said. "Not anywhere you can reach without me." Phase 2 triggered. The safe mode pushed a compiled incident report, complete with timestamps, user IDs, and commit hashes, directly to the federal regulatory body for our industry. It also included a copy of the internal memos Mia had sent me, the ones detailing Richard's side deals with a foreign competitor. "You're making a mistake," Richard hissed. I tilted my head slightly. "Am I? Or are you just upset the game ended before you could cash in?" No one moved for several seconds. Then the woman to Richard's left reached for her phone, typing something furiously. I closed the laptop with a soft click. "Your system will keep running in safe mode until I decide otherwise. You won't lose any more data, but you also won't be able to manipulate it." Richard's hands clenched on the table. "You're holding this company hostage." "I'm holding it accountable," I corrected. For a moment, no one spoke. Then I slid a white envelope from my bag and placed it in the center of the table. Inside was my resignation letter, dated today. "If you want to explain the outage to your clients," I said, standing, "I suggest you start with the truth." I didn't wait for a response. As I walked toward the door, I could feel Richard's glare burning into my back. My phone buzzed again, the same unknown number sending a final message. "You just made yourself a very dangerous man." I stepped out into the hallway, the hum of the server room faint in the distance. The air felt warmer out here, less suffocating. In the quiet, one thought pressed against my mind. I had pulled the trigger, but I wasn't sure yet where the bullet would land. The first cracks showed less than 24 hours after I walked out of the boardroom. By midday, 3 major clients had issued termination notices, citing unresolved performance issues. By evening, industry blogs were running headlines about Helix Dynamics' mysterious operational freeze. The company scrambled to push out press releases, but the statements were thin and defensive, and the speculation only grew louder. The next morning, the real blow landed. A well-known collective of white hat hackers released a detailed report on public forums, complete with screenshots and log excerpts, showing how my script had quietly prevented multiple system collapses over the past 18 months. They didn't name me, but the code signatures were as unique as a fingerprint. Anyone who knew my work could tell. The hackers framed it as a warning to companies that mistreated the people holding their infrastructure together. By noon, my phone was buzzing with messages from former colleagues, some congratulating me, others warning me to be careful. I ignored most of them. The only message that mattered came from my wife. She stood in the kitchen that evening, leaning against the counter, watching me. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer. Regret was too small a word for what I felt, too blunt to describe the tangle of relief, dread, and something that almost felt like vindication. Instead, I looked past her, out the window, where the late light cast long shadows over the yard. That night, the markets closed with Helix Dynamics stock down 40%. News anchors used words like free fall and catastrophic loss of confidence. I went to bed knowing the collapse was only accelerating. The next day, I woke to find my inbox full of requests for interviews. I deleted them all. Around noon, my phone rang, an unlisted number. I let it go to voicemail, but the message was short. "We need to talk. There's an opportunity for you here." By late afternoon, the picture became clearer. Helix's leadership had fractured into factions. One side blamed Richard and his allies for the crisis. The other side doubled down, accusing external sabotage. Somewhere in the middle, a quiet coalition was forming. Directors who wanted me back, not to fix the system, but to use me as a weapon to remove Richard's camp and claim control. The proposition came through a back channel. Come back as a special consultant, restore the system, and they'd give me a seat at the strategic table. I didn't respond. That night, as I pulled into my driveway, headlights flashed in my rearview mirror. A dark sedan rolled past slowly before turning down the street. I didn't think much of it until the same car appeared the next day, parked 2 houses down. On the third day, it was there again. Engine idling. The driver just a shadow behind tinted glass. I stood at the window, watching, the weight of the situation settling deeper into my bones. Inside the house, my wife called from the kitchen, asking if everything was all right. I told her it was fine. But I knew the game had just moved beyond code and corporate politics. It was raining when the knock came. Steady, cold drops tapping the roof like impatient fingers. I opened the door to find Daniel Foster, my former department head, standing on the porch in a dark overcoat. He looked older, more worn, like the last few weeks had carved years into his face. "Ethan," he said, voice low, "we need to talk." I hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered without removing the coat, scanning the living room as if expecting company. My wife appeared in the hallway, but I gave her a look that said we'd be fine. She nodded and disappeared toward the kitchen. "I'll get straight to it," Daniel began. "We want you back. 5 times your old salary, full autonomy over your work. Name your terms." I almost laughed. "You think this is about money?" His jaw tightened. "It's about survival, for both of us. I'm not here for Richard. I'm here for myself. I'm running out of allies, and I know what you're capable of." I crossed my arms. "Why should I trust you? You were in those meetings. You didn't say a word." Daniel's eyes flicked toward the window before he spoke again, softer this time. "Because I was never in control. None of us were. The company isn't just Richard's playground. It's part of something bigger. A network. They manipulate AI tech to inflate valuations, sabotage competitors, even steer market trends. And if you're in their way..." He let the sentence trail off. A hollow feeling spread in my chest. "You're saying they own you." "I'm saying they own everyone in that building, even me." We sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, the rain blurred the streetlights into soft halos. In the other room, my son's voice called out, asking if I could help him with his science project. I excused myself, went to his room, and found him sitting cross-legged on the floor with a half-built model rocket. "Dad," he said, "is it brave to do something even if you're scared?" I knelt beside him, pressing one of the fins into place. "It's the only time it counts," I told him. "If you're not scared, it's not bravery. It's just routine." When I returned to the living room, Daniel was holding a small black USB drive between two fingers. "This," he said, "is everything. Contracts, payment records, comms between executives, enough to burn the whole thing down." I took it, feeling the weight far beyond its size. The next morning, I called Mia. She met me at a quiet cafe, hood up, eyes scanning the street before sitting down. We plugged the USB into my encrypted laptop, scrolling through folder after folder. Emails detailing AI-driven market manipulation, receipts for shell company transactions, even a few videos of private board meetings. "This isn't just about Helix," Mia said. "These names, some of them are from other firms, even overseas." I already knew the next step. I contacted a reporter I trusted from years back, someone who had once covered a security breach I'd helped resolve. His name was Alex Monroe, an investigative journalist with a reputation for burning bridges if it meant exposing corruption. We met in a dimly lit parking garage, passing the USB through a cracked car window. "Give me a week," Alex said. "But Ethan, you need to be ready. This won't just hurt them. It'll make you a target." The following days blurred into a tense rhythm. Calls from Alex, more encrypted files from Mia, cross-checking every document for authenticity. With each piece of evidence, the picture widened. The network wasn't just a shadow over Helix. It was a netcast across multiple tech giants, all moving in coordination. I found myself asking the question late at night, staring at my ceiling. What is justice if it stays hidden? If Alex published everything, it could collapse companies, cost thousands their jobs. But if he didn't, the people pulling the strings would keep tightening them. 7 days later, the story was ready. Alex called, his voice urgent. "We're going live tomorrow morning. It'll hit every major outlet at once." That night, as I was shutting down my computer, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "If you speak, the ones you love will pay." The words didn't carry a signature, but I knew exactly whose shadow they came from. 3 months after the expose detonated across the tech world, my life was unrecognizable. Helix Dynamics had been gutted from the inside, half the board removed, Richard Hayes indicted, the stock reduced to a shadow of its former self. I hadn't stepped foot in that building since the day I walked out, and I had no plans to. Instead, I joined a small but ambitious startup called Lantern Systems. It was founded by 3 former Helix employees, people who had been burned in quieter ways long before my public exit. Their goal was simple: build ethical AI tools, prioritize transparency, and prove a company could scale without selling its soul. The first weeks felt strange. No backroom politics, no whispered accusations in hallways, no one watching for an opportunity to cut me down. My role was clear: lead back-end development, mentor junior engineers, and ensure our infrastructure could grow without cracking under pressure. For the first time in years, my work felt clean. Then, during a late-night review session, one of our junior devs flagged an unusual spike in inbound traffic. At first, I assumed it was a harmless bot scrape. But when I dug into the headers, my stomach tightened. The request patterns mirrored the reconnaissance pings I'd seen at Helix during the first intrusion I ever stopped. I traced the origin to a cluster of obfuscated IPs. One of them carried a digital fingerprint I recognized, the same as the AI manipulation network Daniel had described. Lantern systems had been on the radar for less than 6 months, and already the same people I'd helped expose were probing for weaknesses. I didn't tell the team right away. Instead, I strengthened our defenses and began logging every suspicious packet. A confrontation would come, but I wasn't about to let fear dictate our next move. That Friday morning, I stood at the doorway to my son's school. For the first time in years, I'd driven him there without checking my phone, without thinking about the office, without rushing. He grinned at me before running off to join his friends, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time: space to breathe. When I got home, I opened my email. A single new message sat in my inbox, no sender listed. The subject line read, "We will meet again." I leaned back in my chair. The quiet life never lasted long. By the end of the year, Helix's restructuring was complete. News broke that Richard had taken a plea deal in exchange for testimony against the Shadow Network. Several other executives across multiple companies had been arrested. But the headlines also noted that many of the network's key players remained unidentified. One morning, while reviewing a new security patch, I received a ping on my encrypted chat channel. The sender's ID was a string of numbers I didn't recognize, but the first line made me stop cold. "You never asked who gave the white hat hackers your code." Before I could type a response, the next message came through. It was me. Attached was a short video clip. A man in his late 40s, wearing a baseball cap, his face partially obscured. I knew the voice immediately. It was Adrian Cole, a former senior architect at Novanta Tech, one of Helix's fiercest competitors. He'd vanished from the industry 5 years ago after a rumored disagreement with Novanta's board. "I helped you because I saw myself in you," he said in the video. "I burned out fighting them alone. You finished what I started. Now, keep your guard up because they're not done." The file ended, leaving the cursor blinking in the empty chat box. I sat there for a long time, absorbing the truth. The fight that had consumed so much of my life wasn't just mine. It was part of a larger war, fought in shadows by people who might never meet. That evening, I found my son asleep on the couch, the TV still playing softly in the background. I switched it off, pulled a blanket over him, and sat there for a while, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. "Son," I whispered. Though he couldn't hear me, I kept my promise. Whatever came next, be it another attack, another round with the same enemies, or an entirely new battlefield, I knew I wouldn't be walking into it as the man who once clung to a toxic company out of fear. I was someone else now, and my value, my work, would only ever be placed where it belonged.